I wasn't even given a box, just a plastic security envelope and a smirk from HR. But that was later. Let's rewind. 3 weeks before everything unraveled. We were gathered in the glass meeting room overlooking the city, coffee cups steaming, laptops open, eyes half alert. Then the door opened, and in walked Ryan Cole. Tailored navy suit, custom leather shoes, a firm handshake that lingered half a second too long. Ryan's joining us as our new VP of Sales, the CEO announced. He's here to help accelerate growth, bring in some fresh energy. Fresh was right. The man gleamed like a showroom model. Appreciate the warm welcome, Ryan said, flashing a smile that never touched his eyes. This place has good bones, but if I'm honest, some of those bones are brittle. I believe in velocity, streamlining, high-impact performance only. The room laughed politely. I didn't. My name is Isabella Cruz. I'd spent the last 9 years onboarding clients no one else could land. Enterprise-level partners who needed trust. Not flash. I wasn't loud, but my numbers spoke. And I'd seen men like Ryan before. They came dressed in buzzwords, spoke in disruption, and left behind broken teams. Still, I smiled and nodded. It was safer that way. But the chill settled in early. He removed 2 longtime team leads within his first week. Reassigned roles without warning. Started using phrases like legacy drift and performance dilution in meetings, while looking straight at me. The final nudge came in a private email. Hey, Isabella. Going forward, let's have your reports filtered through a dev. No need to send them directly to the client. That client was Walter Linwood, CEO of our biggest account, and a man I'd worked with personally for 6 years. Something was off. So I dug. I found a buried thread online. Ryan's name tied to a lawsuit 2 years back. A restructuring gone wrong. He'd cost a company 60% of its enterprise revenue in 1 quarter. No formal charges. NDA seal. But the story was there if you knew where to look. I stared at his smiling photo on our company homepage, then glanced out at the city for the first time in 9 years. I felt something I hadn't known this job could trigger. Fear. But also, something sharper. He thinks I'm just another name on the payroll. He doesn't know what I've built, or who I really am. Not yet. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it. Ryan had barely been in the building 2 weeks. Maybe I was just reacting to the change, to the way he walked into rooms like he already owned the outcomes. That didn't mean he was gunning for me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting under my feet, the Monday after his team reorg. I arrived at my desk to find a junior rep, Emily, already seated, headset on, her laptop open to my client list. Hey, she said brightly, like she didn't know she was trespassing. Ryan said I should sit here. He wants the client services team closer to sales for better alignment. That was my seat, my files, my territory. I forced a smile. No problem. But it was a problem, one I didn't know how to name yet. That afternoon, I grabbed coffee across the street with Derek, an old colleague from my early days at the company. He'd transferred to the different firm last year, after what he called a culture shift, when I mentioned Ryan's name. Derek nearly choked on his latte. Wait, Ryan Cole? Tall, smooth? Sounds like a podcast ad? That's the one. Derek leaned in, suddenly serious. Isabella, listen to me. That man gutted 3 departments at our place, smiled through every termination like he was passing out party favors, took credit for a system he didn't build, fired the lead designer, and nearly tanked our client base. If you're smart, you'll get out before you're next. I tried to laugh it off, but the unease settled into my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I've been here 9 years. Derek, I said. My client retention rate is... Doesn't matter. He cut in. He doesn't see value. He sees structure. Anything that came before him is dead weight. Just be careful. That night, I barely slept. I replayed Ryan's expressions, the quick glances in meetings, the way he never addressed me directly anymore. Still, I held on to the idea that I mattered, that I wasn't dispensable, that my relationships had weight, until Thursday morning, when I opened my inbox and saw it. Subject: quick check-in. From Walter Linwood to Isabella Cruz. Time: 8:02 in the morning. Hi, Isabella. I've noticed a shift in communications this week. I haven't heard from you since Monday, and your colleague Emily emailed me instead about the Q2 rollout. Just checking. Are you still overseeing our account? My stomach dropped. Walter wasn't just a client. He was the client. I'd worked with his team since the first cold call that turned into a $12 million contract. He called me by my first name. We'd had lunch in Chicago after his mother passed away. He trusted me. And now, he was being handled by someone who didn't know his business, his tone, his expectations. I stared at the screen for a full minute before typing, "Walter, thank you for the note. I'm still with the company. I'll follow up personally within the hour." I hit send. Then I sat still. Because that email wasn't just concern. It was the first knock at the door, the first sign that someone, maybe several someones, were pulling strings behind my back. Silently, swiftly, and without apology. And I had to ask myself the question I didn't want to face. Was I already gone, and just didn't know it yet? By the second week of Ryan's reign, I was no longer invited to leadership syncs. No announcement, no memo, no explanation. The calendar invites simply stopped coming. I asked Marcia from operations if the Standing Tuesday meetings had been canceled. She gave me that corporate half smile and said, "Oh." Ryan decided to keep it smaller, more agile. Then she quickly looked back at her screen. I nodded, pretending that made sense, and walked back to my desk. But I already knew what was happening. This wasn't a demotion. It wasn't a reassignment. It was exile by erasure. Little things began disappearing from my day. My input on strategic calls, my name on group emails, my voice in conversations I used to lead. It was like watching my own shadow fade. Even the client threads changed. Where once I was looped into every touch point, now emails arrived without my name on them. I'd find out about deliverables only after they were already late or wrong. At first, I thought it was oversight, but too many patterns repeated. Ryan had found a quieter way to push me out, and I knew better than to confront it head-on. That never works, especially not with men like him. So I did what I always did. I observed, I documented, I waited. Then came the real fracture. Walter's team had been preparing a rollout for their diagnostic software. I'd spent 6 months working on the specs, integrations with our platform, security layers, compliance timing. It was a delicate process. Walter was a perfectionist. One misstep could cost trust we'd built over years. Late Thursday, I got a message from my backup contact at Walter's firm. Just 2 lines. "Did Emily get approval from you before sending the update? It's not what we agreed on." My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen any update. I opened the shared drive and found a fresh version of the integration plan, modified, stripped down, and full of shortcuts we had intentionally ruled out during planning. At the top of the doc, authored by Emily R. Emily, the same junior rep Ryan had asked to shadow my accounts. Bright, polite, eager to impress, but completely unprepared to navigate Walter's technical maze. I checked the Slack thread. Emily had posted, "Hey, Ryan, sent the final doc to Walter's team this morning. Should be good now." Ryan replied with a thumbs-up emoji. No mention of me, no review request, no warning. I called Walter immediately. He answered on the second ring. "Isabella," he said, voice cool. "We're trying to stay calm on our end, but we can't work with broken protocol. This rollout has FDA visibility. If this becomes public, it'll hit our board." I apologized profusely, explained that the document hadn't gone through the proper channels, promised to fix it. Walter paused. then sighed. I trust you. But if this happens again, we'll have to reconsider who we work with. When the call ended, I just sat there, frozen. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a violation. Not only had they replaced my work with something sloppy, but they'd sent it under the assumption I was no longer relevant. Worse? The fallout hit me. That evening, Ryan posted in the team Slack. Let's make sure all account materials are client-ready. Mistakes like what happened with Walter's team today reflect on all of us. No names. But everyone knew who handled Walter's team. Or used to. I stared at that message for a long time. Not out of shock. I expected it. But because I'd finally seen the full playbook, Ryan wouldn't fire me. Not yet. He'd let the erosion do the job. Let silence, miscommunication, and misattribution slowly isolate me. It was death by 1,000 calendar exclusions. And the worst part? I was still showing up, still trying, still replying to emails, still hoping it was salvageable. That night, I stayed late, redrafting the integration plan myself, adding notes Walter would recognize, reattaching the version history, and emailing him directly. I didn't CC anyone. I didn't explain. Just one line at the top. Walter, this is the original plan, the one we built together. Then I shut my laptop, packed my bag, and walked past the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights below glimmered like a million possibilities. But inside that building, one thing had become clear. I was no longer part of the conversation, just the blame. And someone, somewhere upstairs, wanted it that way. The next all-hands meeting was called The Road Ahead, a feel-good title. A misleading one. Every department was represented. Sales, client services, product, compliance. The conference room was full, the air thick with caffeine and tension. Ryan stood at the front like he'd just closed a billion-dollar deal, sleeves rolled up, marker in hand, smile razor-sharp. He started with a slide labeled Efficiency Through Evolution. Let's be honest, he said. Pacing in front of the projector, every company reaches a point where momentum stalls, not because of markets, not because of product, but because some people start coasting. He clicked the next slide. It showed 2 columns, drivers and passengers. He turned slowly, scanning the room. We need drivers, not passengers. People who push, not those who just stay seated, hoping someone else hits the gas. The room stayed silent, but everyone shifted, uncomfortable, quietly calculating who the speech was about. I already knew. Ryan didn't need to say my name. He didn't have to point. Everyone knew who had been phased out of meetings. Everyone knew which major account had stumbled recently. Everyone knew who used to run that show. Me. I felt the burn of 50 silent stares. My jaw tightened. But I didn't flinch. I wouldn't give him the pleasure. He went on, full of startup jargon and hollow charisma, outlining goals, numbers, and buzzwords like velocity, ownership, and cost hygiene. I stopped listening. I was too busy counting the seconds it took for my humiliation to land. Too busy imagining myself 5 years ago, running point on million-dollar integrations, leading strategy calls, onboarding 3 new enterprise clients in 1 quarter. Back then, I was the one standing in front of the room. Now I was being erased in front of it. The meeting ended with polite applause. People stood, shuffled, avoided eye contact. I packed up my notes in silence. I didn't trust my voice enough to say goodbye. Back at my desk, an email was waiting. Subject, temporary leave option, from my HR shared services time. 10:15 in the morning. Hi, Isabella. In an effort to align current staffing with projected revenue and budget targets, the leadership team is offering select employees the opportunity to take a non-mandatory, unpaid leave of absence. This is voluntary, but highly encouraged. Duration, up to 30 days, with a review for extension. Benefits will remain active during this time. Please respond by end of day with your decision. HR Shared Services. I stared at the screen. Stunned, my hands trembled. They weren't firing me, not outright. They were freezing me out, dignified on paper, strategic in optics. But I knew exactly what it was. A coward's layoff. A way to gut without confrontation, cut without blood. I read the email again. Voluntary, but highly encouraged. Like being handed a gun and told, "You don't have to pull the trigger, but someone will." Eventually, I leaned back, heart pounding. No conversation, no warning, no acknowledgement of my work. Just a template and a deadline. I thought of Walter, of all the clients I'd carried through chaos, of the weekends I worked, the holidays I skipped, the anniversaries I missed, and this was the thanks? A thinly veiled exile served over email? My humiliation gave way to something hotter. Cleaner. Sharper. Fury. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that fuels planning, the kind that sharpens memory and narrows focus. I didn't reply right away. I closed the laptop, locked my screen, and walked to the women's restroom. Inside, I stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection didn't blink. "Some of us are passengers," he had said, but what he didn't know, what he would never understand, is that I was never riding. I built the damn engine. It happened on a Monday. Of course it did. Mondays are when companies do their dirty work, when inboxes are still foggy, HR walks quieter, and bad news arrives before your second cup of coffee. I was at my desk by 7:30 in the morning, trying to look busy even though I already knew the walls were closing in. The unpaid leave request had sat in my inbox all weekend. Unanswered. I hadn't replied. I hadn't needed to. They weren't waiting for permission. At 8:03 in the morning, I got a calendar invite. Check-in, conf room A. No subject, no context, just two names on the invite, mine and Ryan's. I stared at the screen for a second too long. My heart started tapping against my ribs. I grabbed a notebook I wouldn't use, walked to conference room A, and found Ryan already inside, standing, not seated. He was dressed like always, a custom-fitted blazer, crisp shirt, and that polished, casual confidence of a man who thinks consequences are for other people. "Morning," he said, without looking up. He motioned to the chair across from him. I sat. On the table was a single sheet of paper. Face down, he tapped it once with his finger. "This is straightforward. No small talk. No delay." "We're moving in a new direction," he said. "Realignment of priorities. Efficiency across verticals." I waited, saying nothing. "You've been instrumental, of course," he added quickly, like a legal disclaimer. "But some roles evolve. Others, sunset." That word, sunset, hit harder than I expected. Sunset meant discard. It meant vanish quietly, unannounced, like a feature being phased out of an app. Ryan flipped the page toward me. I saw my name typed in bold. The memo was short, 4 paragraphs, most of it legalese, termination effective immediately. Final paycheck to be deposited within 72 hours. Badge deactivated by noon. This wasn't easy, he lied. But it's necessary. I opened my mouth to speak, but I didn't know what to say. No one else was in the room, no one from HR, no one to pretend this was fair. Just Ryan, just me, just silence. And then he smiled. Not wide, just the corner of his mouth tilted. Enough to show amusement. "I wouldn't worry too much," he said. "Your accounts won't even notice." I froze. In one line, he dismissed 9 years of trust, negotiation, and loyalty. He stripped my work down to 0, as if I'd been a name on an invoice and nothing more. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still, because deep down, something broke. Not pride, not even dignity. What shattered was something more fragile. Faith. Faith in merit. Faith in recognition. Faith that doing the right thing would ever be enough. "I see," I said finally, voice flat. Ryan nodded, pleased with the efficiency. It will escort you out once you collect your things. You've got about 20 minutes. 20 minutes to disappear. He reached for the memo, but I placed my hand on it and slid it into my notebook. I didn't thank him. I didn't argue. What's the point of shouting when the door's already locked? I walked back to my desk slowly, passing by teammates who avoided my eyes. Emily was typing furiously. Marcia glanced up, then down again. One person offered a small, pitiful smile. Nobody said anything. No one came to my defense. No one asked if it was a mistake, because deep down, they knew it wasn't. This was a purge, and I was just the first. I packed my things, just a few notebooks, a pen I liked, a photo of my sister and me on a client trip to Austin. At the elevator, I paused from where I stood. I could see the conference room glass. Ryan was still inside, already laughing with someone else. He looked weightless, and I felt erased, but not empty. Not yet. I didn't cry, not when I handed in my badge, not when it escorted me past the lobby where I used to greet clients by name, not even when I stepped outside into the sharp, bitter wind of a too sunny Monday. I just walked, down 2 blocks, through the same coffee shop I used to rush through on early morning calls. Then toward the parking garage, where I'd once parked next to Ryan's Mercedes before I knew who he was. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed even. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. Just something colder, clean, quiet, like snow settling after an avalanche by 9:45 in the morning. I was home. I didn't bother taking off my coat. I tossed my bag onto the couch, opened my laptop, and waited for it to boot. Then I clicked into a folder buried 3 levels deep. No desktop shortcuts, no labels, just a name. Pulse Core 0v3, the system booted in grayscale. Sleek, minimal, self-contained. No connection to company servers. No one even remembered I had built it. Not really. It had started as a side project, then became a performance tool. Quietly, I kept it alive, maintained it, refined it. Pulse was never about sabotage. That was never the plan. It was about transparency. It was built to protect clients, not punish companies. But now, the lines were blurring. The dashboard flickered to life. Client tags, account IDs, relationship chains. More than 24 enterprise clients, each with a unique profile that tracked key trust indicators, service delays, changes in point of contact, unresolved escalations. And at the center of it all, Human Trust Index, the proprietary algorithm I'd written myself. The moment a client's account manager was replaced, or separated, without prior notice, Pulse flagged it. Then it did what it was programmed to do. It alerted the client, automatically. No emotion, no commentary, just data. I hadn't touched it in weeks. But Pulse didn't need prompting. It ran on its own. At 10:07 in the morning, I watched a soft red bar slide across the dashboard. Walter Linwood, primary contact change detected. I didn't press a button. I didn't send an email. Pulse did. It generated a notice marked Service Continuity Alert and sent it to Walter's team. Not to accuse, not to expose, just to inform. Your designated contact has been changed. Please verify your service preferences. That's all it took. Because with Walter, like many of the others, the relationship wasn't built on a signature. It was built on trust, on me. I stared at the interface. Nothing flashy, no dramatics, just automation doing what it was designed to do. And yet, it felt like fire beneath the surface, because now the system would do what I couldn't: speak without speaking, act without being seen, echo the silence they'd handed me. This wasn't revenge. Not in the way Ryan would understand it. I wasn't going to storm back in. I wasn't going to beg for fairness or claim injustice. That would be too obvious. No, this would be slower, smarter, icy. I closed the laptop and stood in my quiet apartment. The city outside buzzed on like nothing had happened. Maybe to them, nothing had. But inside Pulse, one silent thread had been pulled, and I knew what came next. One alert would become two, two would become 5, then 10. I wouldn't lift a finger, but they'd start to feel it. Not all at once. Not today. But soon enough. They'd feel the system shifting, like something they'd buried was waking up and breathing. Day 1 was quiet, too quiet. No missed calls, no emails, no messages from former clients, not even a bounce back. It was as if the world had simply accepted that I had vanished. I refreshed my inbox every hour. Even though no one was supposed to contact me, I wasn't on any lists anymore. No role, no signature. I didn't exist in the system, and yet, Pulse was running. By noon, the logs showed 7 auto alerts had been sent, 7 clients, all flagged for unannounced contact changes. No personal notes, just soft. Neutral warnings. Service continuity update. Please verify account relationship alignment. I expected a response. Instead, the silence continued. Day 2 was worse. I spent most of it staring at my screen, pretending to read articles I couldn't finish. My phone remained untouched on the table. Screen dark. The city moved outside my window, unaware of the quiet war unfolding between a dead system and the hands that thought they'd buried it. At 10:06 in the morning, Pulse flagged 2 more clients, both from sectors Ryan barely understood. Long-standing, high-stakes accounts that required trust more than speed. Still, no one replied. Day 3 came and went. I started to wonder if I'd miscalculated. Maybe the New Point people had managed to keep the clients calm. Maybe the relationships I had nurtured over years were easier to replace than I thought. That idea hurt more than I expected. Was I really so forgettable? By day 4, I stopped checking every 15 minutes. I left the apartment in the morning, walked around the park twice, bought a coffee, came back just after 9. I sat down, unlocked my laptop, opened my email, and there it was. Subject: Pulse Alert? From Walter Linwood. Time: 8:02 in the morning. To Company's Client Services, email. CC: Isabella Cruz, CC. Thomas Haley, CEO. Halvik Systems, CC. Mia Zhang, President. Vitramed, CC. Samuel Ngo, Head of Strategic Operations. Core Data, CC. Layla Roth, Founder. Silvermark AI, CC. Dan Fielding, CEO. Apex Tech Global. My heart jumped into my throat. I clicked, To whom it may concern. This morning, I received a Pulse system alert regarding a change in primary contact. As far as I'm aware, no such notice was given in advance, and no formal transition has been communicated. Can someone please explain why our point of contact, Isabella Cruz, appears to have been removed without protocol? CC'd. Here are peers in our industry who have either integrated Pulse into their own systems or whose teams have similarly noted shifts in communication this week. We'd like clarity. Thud. WW. I leaned back slowly, hands still on the keyboard. He had noticed. More than that, he had made it public. Walter hadn't just emailed the company. He had looped in 5 of the most influential leaders in our entire client base. People I'd worked with personally. People who knew what trust looked like and what its sudden absence felt like. I reread the message. It was calm, measured. But the subtext was thunderous. Why were we not told? Why did we get a system warning instead of a person? What the hell is going on over there? This wasn't just a red flag. It was a signal fire. Pulse had spoken. But now, Walter had amplified it and added names that carried weight in every industry boardroom from Boston to San Jose. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Let Ryan handle it. Let him draft a dozen versions of a non-apology and scramble for answers he didn't have. Because this wasn't just about one alert anymore. It was about all of them, and the dominoes had just begun to fall. By the end of the day, Walter's email had already made its way across half the company. Someone forwarded it to me anonymously. No message, just the subject line. "Looks like you lit a fuse." I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen for a moment, then closed my laptop and walked to the window, down on the street. Life moved at its usual pace, taxis blaring, crosswalks blinking, people spilling out of corner cafes. No one knew what had just been set in motion. Not out there, but inside that building I had just been erased from. The walls were starting to tremble. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. By the following morning, the tremble had turned into tremors. At 9:06 in the morning, Pulse flagged its 10th alert, then its 11th. Each client had received a subtle, neutral message confirming that their assigned relationship manager had changed without prior discussion. And now, they were writing back. One by one, they began to reply, not to me, but to the company's shared inboxes, filled with carefully worded subject lines: clarification request, point of contact, service ownership reassessment, transition notice not received. Each message was clinical, polite, and heavy with warning. By 10:30, I knew something had shifted internally. A former teammate, still loyal, texted me quietly. "Ryan just had a closed-door meeting with legal. He's blaming operations for not notifying the clients." Of course he was. He couldn't blame me, not openly. I was no longer there. And Pulse? It wasn't officially company property, just a support tool I'd once piloted, then maintained quietly. There was no email chain linking it to an internal directive. No one even understood how it worked. That's what made it perfect. By noon, I received another anonymous forward. Subject: urgent review, client concern. From compliance liaison. To executive support. Attached was a message from Vitramed's president, Mia Jang. "We've put our service agreement on pause until we receive written assurance that Isabella Cruz will continue to oversee the relationship. If not, we'll begin exploring alternatives immediately." That made 2. By 3:08 in the afternoon, Core Data and Halvik Systems had followed suit. Formal notices of service suspension pending alignment review, all within the same 7-hour window. Ryan, apparently, still believed it was salvageable. A short internal memo, also leaked to me, read, "Some clients are reacting to transition gaps. We're treating this as a communication misfire. Nothing strategic. Nothing strategic." That phrase made me laugh, quietly, alone in my apartment. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and leaned back in my chair. He thought this was just a ripple. He didn't realize it was the start of an undertow. At 4:02 in the afternoon, it arrived, the message I didn't expect but had secretly hoped for. A short note from Dan Fielding, CEO of Apex Tech Global, to Client Services at Northbridge Group. .com/cc, Executive Board, subject, clarification. "Let me be clear, our cooperation was with Isabella. Your company was the technical layer. If she's no longer part of the picture, neither are you." I read it twice, then a third time, letting the words settle. That wasn't a warning. That was a death sentence. For the contract, Dan wasn't the kind of executive who bluffed. He moved fast, made decisions faster, and rarely changed course once his mind was made up. And now, he just pulled a $9 million partnership off the table. Because I wasn't in the room, I didn't celebrate. There was no need for confetti or cheers or vengeful toasts. That wasn't my style. Instead, I stood in my kitchen, holding the warm mug between both hands. Eyes on the clock, 4:05 in the afternoon. Somewhere in the Northbridge offices, a chain reaction was unfolding. I imagined Ryan hunched over a table, sleeves rolled up again, spinning half-truths and hollow apologies while the board questioned him for the first time. And I smiled. Not a big, victorious grin, just a quiet one. The kind you allow yourself when the storm starts moving in, and no one knows you're the one who opened the sky. By Friday morning, Northbridge was on fire. Not literally, but in all the ways that matter. I didn't need insider updates to know. The signs were everywhere: shifted LinkedIn statuses, panicked recruiter pings, an unusual spike in private signal messages from people I hadn't spoken to in months. By 8:15 in the morning, Pulse flagged its 15th alert. 5 major clients had already paused contracts. 3 more were in review mode, internally. The panic was growing like mold, slow, quiet, and spreading across departments. And Ryan was cornered. He called a full team meeting that morning, an emergency sync disguised under the title Realignment Brief. Someone inside recorded it and sent me the audio. The subject line said, "You might want to hear this." I listened to it with my morning coffee. Earbuds in, volume low. Ryan opened with false calm. "These disruptions are temporary," he began. "We're addressing the confusion with clear communication strategies." Then his voice sharpened. "But make no mistake, this breakdown in client confidence didn't happen in a vacuum. It's a reflection of internal missteps, missed cues, weak coordination." A pause, a breath. "In particular, I want to address the handling of legacy relationships. Some of you have relied too heavily on outdated rapport instead of building new client strategies aligned with our vision." The room was silent. You could hear someone swallow on the recording. Then came the pivot. Blame. He pointed at 2 names, Emily and Marcia, the junior and the mid-level project coordinator. Emily had tried to shadow my accounts. Marcia had once copied the wrong client contact into a pitch email. "They weren't ready," Ryan said, "but they weren't unsupported. And now we all have to clean up the result." The recording crackled. Then, a voice. Emily. Shaky, nervous. I tried to follow the file notes," she said. "But I never got a transition brief. I didn't even know half the history. I tried." Silence, and then, quietly, the sound of someone standing, a chair scraping, a door opening. The next email I received was a screenshot. Emily's resignation, sent to HR at 10:07 in the morning, effective immediately. No goodbye email, no exit lunch, just a 24-year-old girl, humiliated and burnt out, taking the fall for a man in a pressed blazer. I didn't feel vindictive, but I wasn't sorry either, because I had warned them, silently, systematically, and they hadn't listened. At noon, the most telling piece of evidence surfaced. It came from a leak, an internal folder, now circulating among mid-level staff, labeled Client Health Index, Q4 Draft. In the file was a section that had been suppressed from final reports, a raw feedback index from top-tier clients gathered just 2 months before Ryan arrived. Under Apex Tech, Halvix, Vitramed, and Core Data, one recurring line appeared: "Only trust Isabella. Our continuity relies on Isabella. Remove Isabella, and we reassess everything." Each version was worded slightly differently, but the message was the same, and it had been ignored. Or worse, buried. Ryan had seen this, or someone on his team had, and they deleted it from final presentations to the board. It was a liability, a red flag waving before the storm. And now it was a banner flying through every hallway in whispers and forwarded PDFs. I stared at the document for a long time, not because I needed validation, but because it proved the one thing Ryan had tried hardest to deny. I mattered. Not because of my title, not because of my seniority, but because I had done the work. The unseen, unflashy, consistent work of earning trust and holding it like gold. Now, in their panic, they were clawing for solutions they had already thrown away. That afternoon, someone else from my old team messaged me. "They're offering retention bonuses to stop people from jumping ship. Even Marcia got one." But it was too late. The damage wasn't in the people who stayed, it was in the trust already lost. And trust. Once cracked, doesn't glue back together. By 5:24 in the afternoon, Pulse logged its 17th alert. I closed the laptop, poured a glass of wine, and stepped out onto my balcony. The city below buzzed as usual, but somewhere 12 floors down, the lights were flickering in the offices that once tried to erase me. And now, they were learning what happens when you cut the wrong thread, and the whole tapestry unravels. The email arrived at 8:09 in the morning. It was marked urgent. From Ryan Cole, subject, potential advisory engagement. I stared at it without opening it for a full minute, sipping my coffee like it was any other Tuesday morning. It wasn't, the night before. I'd gone to bed to the sound of 5 more clients freezing contracts. Pulse had recorded its 20th alert. The message boards were whispering about leadership shakeups. And Northbridge's reputation, the one I had spent nearly a decade quietly holding together, was fracturing like glass under pressure. Now Ryan was in my inbox. I clicked. Hi, Isabella. We're working to re-establish continuity across a few high-value accounts, and your history with these clients has come up repeatedly as a key factor. The board is open to engaging you on a short-term consulting basis to help stabilize active relationships and assist with transition planning. This would, of course, be a paid engagement, and we're happy to discuss terms that reflect your experience and prior contributions. Let me know if you're open to a quick call. Ryan. It was dressed in corporate language, diplomatic, professional, but the desperation leaked through the spacing. I could practically hear the strain in every line. Ryan wasn't offering opportunity. He was offering cleanup, and I was supposed to be the mop. I didn't reply right away. I let the cursor blink for a few minutes while I stared out the window, watching 2 pigeons bicker on the fire escape. Then I typed one line. You already reassigned my value, and hit send. I closed my laptop. No follow-up, no invoice, no attachment, just that one sentence. Let him sit with it. Let the board read it. Let them understand what happens when you treat people like cogs and then come begging when the machine falls apart. I didn't need their money. Not anymore. Because 10 minutes later, a different message came through. This one wasn't from Northbridge. It was from Walter Linwood. Just one line, sent over private text. We've cleared funding for something new. You should lead it. I read it once. Then again, I didn't answer. Not yet. I just let the message sit there like a secret only we shared. The implications were obvious. Walter had spoken to the others. Mia, Dan, Layla, maybe even more. They'd seen enough of the collapse to know what they didn't want in their own supply chains anymore. Politics, ego, and men like Ryan. And what they did want? Trust, consistency, someone who didn't need a title to lead. Me. I set my phone down gently and exhaled, a quiet release that had been building for weeks. The vindication didn't roar. It didn't explode. It arrived like fog lifting, slow and undeniable. Across the room, my whiteboard still had notes from old projects I'd assumed would be lost forever. Names of clients I thought I might never speak to again. Dead ends I now saw as foundations. I walked to it, erased the top line, and wrote a new one in bold. Build what they broke. I wasn't going to rebuild Northbridge. I was going to build something better. Something that wouldn't need layers of PR to keep clients. Something where trust wasn't a bullet point, it was the culture. And this time, I wouldn't be just the anchor holding it together. I'd be the one drawing the map. At 10:42 in the morning, my phone buzzed again, this time from Mia at Vitramed. Heard you got the text. We're in if you're in. 2 minutes later, Dan from Apex Tech replied to an earlier thread. Say the word. We'll bring legal. And just like that, the balance shifted, not with fanfare, not with announcement, but with quiet, controlled certainty. Ryan wanted me back so he could patch the cracks in a ship that had already sunk. Walter wanted me at the helm of something that hadn't even been built yet, and for the first time in weeks, I felt it again, not anger, not revenge, but direction. And this time, I wasn't following anyone else's. I was drawing my own. The meeting room wasn't much to look at. 4 mismatched chairs, a scratched whiteboard, and a borrowed projector that buzzed too loud. But to me, it felt like the control room of a spacecraft just before liftoff. 4 of us sat around the table. Emily, who had walked out after Ryan threw her under the bus. Marcia, who turned down a retention bonus and left without a second thought. Andre from Tech, who used to patch Pulse when I didn't have time to dig through the back end. And Yasmin from Client Success, my first hire back in year 3. All of them were here, not because they needed jobs, but because they believed in what we were about to build. "So," Emily said, breaking the silence, "what are we calling this?" I looked up from the sketch I'd been marking up on the whiteboard. Boxes, arrows, feedback loops. It looked chaotic to anyone else, but to us, it was the blueprint of a different kind of company, one that didn't chase clients like prey or treat employees like replaceable gears. "We're not naming anything until it works," I said with a smile. "But the core stays the same. Pulse. Only better," Yasmin nodded. "Real-time relationship monitoring. Trust alerts. Silent signals. But this time," Marcia added, "built from the ground up as client-facing, transparent. Let them see what they're feeling instead of guessing." "Exactly," I said. "We take the invisible metrics, confidence decay, communication drop-off, pattern deviation, and turn them into something measurable, something predictive, something powerful." Andre leaned in. "And this time, we own it!" I smiled at that, because for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of ownership in my bones, not the corporate kind, the real kind, not paperwork and shares, but purpose. This wasn't a job. It was an answer. For every ignored warning, every stripped credit, every "your accounts won't notice," this was the response I never got to give. We were going to build the system they didn't deserve. And this time, we'd do it right. I stood up, capped the marker, and faced the group. "The first client is already waiting," I said. "Walter's team wants to be pilot, and Vitramed is ready to go to legal once we finalize the first build." "What's the budget?" Emily asked. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A new message from Dan Fielding. "We'd like to invest $2 million, no strings. You run it. We follow." I read it aloud. Andre whistled. "That's more than we projected for Series A." "Dan doesn't throw money," Marcia said. "He throws belief." I sat down slowly, rereading the message. My fingers hovered above the reply button, then stopped. I didn't need to respond yet. I just needed to let the moment settle, because this wasn't a maybe. It was happening. We were no longer rebuilding. We were building new, on terms we defined, with tools we designed, for clients who chose us. Not because of price, not because of speed, but because they trusted us not to vanish behind a smile and a contract. That was what Pulse had always been about. Not code, not automation, but trust distilled into logic. Now it was time to make that logic visible. I looked around the table. "I don't want to replicate Northbridge," I said. "I don't want departments with walls between them or leadership that hides. If we're going to do this, if we're really going to do this, we build a company where people are the product." Emily raised her coffee cup like a toast. "Then let's build the one we never got to work for." We clinked mugs and laughed. Not loudly, not carelessly, but like people who'd survived something and come out the other side not weaker, but sharper. At 4:01 in the afternoon, I opened a new document on my laptop. Proposal. Project Resurge underneath. I typed, "A platform that listens before people have to scream." I saved it, closed the lid, and looked out the window. No glass tower this time, no corner office, just a wide view of possibility. And in that quiet room, with paper cups and whiteboard dust and too many extension cords, we began. The new office wasn't grand, not yet, but it had light. Real, golden, late afternoon light that poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows like it belonged there. There were no frosted glass partitions, no sterile branding slogans pasted on the walls, just open space, ideas scribbled in marker, and the steady hum of something alive. On the west wall, beside the window overlooking the city, hung a single framed print. An email from Walter Linwood. Subject, final thought. Time, 9:01 in the morning. We didn't lose a service provider. We lost the person who kept us human. Glad we found you again. It sat there, unassuming, black text on white paper. But for me, it was everything. More than any contract. More than any job title I'd ever had. It was proof that the silent work, the listening, the late nights, the small decisions no one ever saw, had meant something. Behind me, the team buzzed through their first product roadmap session. Emily sketched UI frames on a touchscreen board. Marcia was on a call with legal, negotiating Dan Fielding's investment terms. Andre and Yasmin were already planning client onboarding flows for the pilot. No hierarchy, no posturing, just builders, just believers. And me, no longer trying to prove I deserved to be in the room. I was the room. A notification pinged quietly on my laptop. I tapped it open without much thought. The headline read, Ryan Cole steps down amid client exodus Northbridge, removed from preferred vendor list, across 5 industries. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just breathed. Not because I wanted him to fall, but because I had stopped falling when I left. They thought they were shedding dead weight, but the weight I carried wasn't what held them back. It was what had kept everything standing. Now, they were rebuilding from the wreckage they created, without the people who'd held it all together, without the trust they took for granted. And I was building something new, something honest, something mine. As the team moved into the next discussion, I stepped aside for a moment and stared out the window. The city was still buzzing. Coffee carts, taxis, people moving fast and missing everything. But I saw it all. The girl who used to sit quietly in the back of meetings, whose name was left off memos, the woman who had been erased, dismissed, replaced, and the leader who had reemerged, not through vengeance, but vision. On the whiteboard near the entrance, someone had written our unofficial motto, we listen before the silence. And maybe that was the biggest win of all, not just surviving, not just retaliating, but building something so true, so steady, that no one could silence it again. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or replaced, if someone once made you feel like your value could be reassigned or erased, let this be your reminder. Your worth isn't in their recognition. It's in the quiet things you build when no one's looking. And the power you hold when you finally walk away. What would you have done in Isabella's place? Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your story. Share this story with someone who needs to remember they're not invisible. And if you believe in stories where quiet power wins, subscribe for more. We're just getting started.